So anything organic, that gives you your nice browns. And this is kind of a cold compost because you're not putting it thick enough to get hot, but it still lets the worms and the other life eat it and it breaks it down. Now if you're going to do it in a compost pile, then you do kind of want to have that ratio between browns and greens, your nitrogens versus your carbons. But if you're going to do that, you want it at least 3 or 4 feet thick, wide, and long. And that'll allow it to heat up, and then you just turn it as you want to, and that kills all the diseases, all the seeds, and all the pathogens. I'm not a stickler to that. I can never kill all the tomato seeds because we put our kitchen scraps in there. And so I put volunteer tomatoes everywhere that we have to. Some we let grow, some we pre-grow. Now, when I say this is weed free and there weren't any weeds, this is pretty much true. But if you're going to use straw or if you're going to use hay, you will bring in some weed seed. You'll bring seeds in, but they don't germinate in ground. They just germinate into the mulch. I just walk by, kick them out, or I take the pitchfork and turn them over, and then the roots die. You know, they air die. Excuse me. Becomes part of the mulch again. So that's basically what we do, and I thought folks might be interested because I'm lazy. Do not want to weed. I just don't want to do it anymore. And by doing it this way, I found we don't have to weed, but the benefits are amazing. We water maybe once a week if we have to. And you just do that. You know, you do the old method where you just dig back and stick your finger in. If it's damp, you don't have to water. And obviously, if it's really hot, your squash or your tomatoes will pull their leaves in a little bit. You know how they do that. But then in the evening, they pop right back up. So that's not a water thing. That's just the what they're trying to do is keep from respirating out the water that's in the ground. Now, having all that life in there allows those roots to grow deep, which also allows passageways. And that's why when it really, really rains hard, it goes into your soil and it doesn't run off. It goes down in and it's there for the plants and for the roots. And that's why it's another benefit, but that's why you don't have to water nearly as much. And I haven't fertilized in 6 years. And year before last, in this particular instance, we had multiple hills with 6-pound sweet potatoes in there, and our big one was 8.5 pounds. Not a bit of fertilizer. And people don't think I'm telling the truth, but we don't. And we try not to spray anything, but we do get squash bugs like everybody else does. And with the neighbor's hay, I get blister beetles. And blister beetles will take and eat an entire row of carrots or beets in an afternoon. If you've ever had the little yellow striped ones, they come in mass. So we use a neem oil. But if you're going to do that, like down at Lowe's or whatnot, you can find it. But that's not what you want. You want the cold pressed, and it needs to be cold pressed because it has an azarac. I can't say the word. It has the part in it that actually will kill the pest, and it's natural and it will not hurt the food. We use that on a daily basis. But we also use, you have to put a little Dawn dishwashing soap. Oh, yes. Yes.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but is it diatomaceous earth?
Diatomaceous earth.
Do you recommend using that?
Diatomaceous earth, I don't use it so much because of the size of our garden, but yes, as you know, it's just microfossilized critters, and it's very sharp, and it will take in, for some of the bugs that will crawl across it, it will break their waxy layer down and it will make them dehydrate. And yeah, that's not a bad way to go. And it's very natural, and it'll just goes right back in.
I had to use it for the rose ponies this year, because they would get my seedlings too bad, so I just sprinkled that around and I had to replant this one.
Okay, well that's perfect. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. The roly-polies, you will find that in the deep mulch, but they mostly eat that kind of dead, decaying material. So if you want to trap them, you can take an old, like a half of an orange, and squeeze most of the juice out, put it upside down, you can attract a bunch if you're trying to catch them and kill them and get them out of there. I ignore them. They don't hurt our garden at all, and I've got them everywhere. but they eat the mulch, which puts castings into the soil, which is good for the soil. So it's a balance. All of this is a balance, and we come into nature and we're trying to force plants from all different parts of the world to grow in one spot, and we're also living with critters that like to eat what we like to eat. So you can go to town and fertilize and chemicalize and do, but that's not the point. The point is to be healthy. So what we want to do is, I plant very, very heavy because I know I'm going to give some away. I know I'm going to lose some stuff. That's just part of the deal. And I never mark my seedlings, and it drives my wife crazy because she's like, I don't know. I don't know. The reason I don't is I plant heavy and I want this balance. I can never be disappointed if I don't know what that is, because I'm not expecting something. Because if you're expecting it and it doesn't grow, you know, oh man, it didn't grow. I'm just happy to have something. And we eat everything that we plant in the garden, so whatever comes up is what we get that year. And no matter what you're doing, there's going to be ups and downs in your years. That's just, the weather's going to be different, the pests are going to be different. You're going to stand on the wrong foot when you plant in the moon, but you know, things change. That's just gardening. And as long as you have patience and you know you're putting in the right work, you're going to get something. And that's kind of our philosophy behind it. The best part is there's virtually no weeds. And the hardest work you do is harvesting. Because we're far enough from the house, when you get 70 pounds of potatoes in the tote, that's a long walk. So it's a tough problem to have. But that's basically why I thought people would be interested in what I had to, what we learned. Are there any questions?
Do you companion plant?
All the time. I companion plant everything. Okay, the only reason they plant in a row and space out is because of mechanization. Is so the tractor can go down there and the tractor can plow and the tractor can harvest. You go out in the prairie, how many different species, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, groups all working in there. They've got a healthy biome underneath that bringing all that nutrients that's naturally in the ground, and all the plants get what they need. So I plant heavy. I've never had a problem with that. I plant all different kinds of things side by side. Right now we've got tomatoes. I've planted onions between them. I've got beets growing. I've got carrots growing in my line of tomatoes. Where there's space, I also drive my wife crazy because it's a jungle. You can hardly walk out there with the amount of stuff we have. And so, yeah, I companion plant as much as I can.
You start your seeds
indoors? A lot. Squash seeds, there's kind of an argument about if you start them inside, you want to plant them quick. You don't want to get too far past the first true leaves. Otherwise they get shocky and you slow them down. They grow so fast anyhow, you can almost just direct sow those. So I do both because, well, one, I'm doing this, so I need some content, obviously, so I actually do start stuff in the greenhouse. We did tomatoes this year. I started those in the greenhouse. Oh my God. I just scattered them on, and I was like, okay, I'll get a few. I got 300. So then I pricked those out, I repotted them, and then I gave them away. And then I gave them away. And then I gave them away. And I planted 100 out in the garden, and then I gave them away. It was just amazing. So, yeah, we finally got a greenhouse put together where we're able to grow, to start. We used to start a few things in the house. The way the house oriented with the sun, it didn't work very well for us. But now, this year, we did pretty well starting things. So, yeah. But we had a late frost down in the foil area. I mean, I had 5 tomatoes in it, and we got that last little frost, and it set us back. We're about 3 weeks behind. That's how nature does it. They fall, they hit the ground. They're not dug in 4 inches. They're not dug in 8 inches. They're not spaced out. So, was 2 years, 2 years ago, I finally did the roost out, where I just went out there and started doing that. and it works really well. Lettuce, you do not want to put any mulch back over on top. Lettuce doesn't like to push up through. Carrots, you don't want to mulch. They are delicate until they get started. When it's hot, you want to start them under a board or a cardboard, some system like that. But once they get any size to them, then you start mulching back. The really nice thing about the mulch system is if I open it up, plant something, they start germinating. The wind usually kind of starts filtering that back around there. I never really actually have to touch it. So that's a nice benefit to that. You know, I say it's not my garden, I just tend it. God grows what he wants to grow. And anytime there's a volunteer, that's where that plant needs to be. I just leave it alone, and we usually have a pretty good harvest off of that. So, any other questions?
And I just squish the eggs or get whatever. Yeah.
See, and I like what you said about the ants. We have ants everywhere. Different kind, I mean, however many species there are.
Yeah.
I just scrape them off and let it fall on the ground.
Okay.
Because they eat them up. And I know how predatory the ants are because we also employ praying mantis. Our first year with praying mantis, got a bag, got 5 little seed or little egg cases, 1 hatch. Okay, and they're in the bag. So we go out there and everything falls out of the bag. The little praying mantis hit the ground. Ants come in like mad, started grabbing the praying mantis. Yeah, it was a bad experience, but so we learned to take those little eggs and put them in individual jars, and then once they hatch, then we take them out and we can place them high so the ants don't get them. But so the life, and that goes back to all the life in your soil. They all have their place. It's a balance. They all do something. So scraping the eggs off, I just let them fall, and those ants will take care of them.
Okay.
Because it's really hard to get, and if you really rub too hard, you rip holes in your plants and stuff. But if you just scrape them off, I just go on.
You were fixing to say something earlier about the dish soap and.
Okay, with the neem oil, it's a real oil, and it wants to float on top. You put a little Dawn dish soap in there, it helps mix it up so that you can spray it, and it goes pretty easy. Now, just Dawn dish soap and water is a really good insecticide, except it's a contact. There's no residue on it. If you see squash bugs or blister beetles, and we did a test, we did just pure neem oil, we did a mixture of Dawn soap and water, and then, what was the third thing we did? I'll think of it and it just escapes me. But both of those, we caught the blister beetles, put them in a jar, and put the mixtures in there. They all kill the blister beetles. So Dawn really does, it's a nice insecticide. And I'm not hawking Dawn, but we wash our dishes with it, so it's safe, you know. You don't want to have, just like fertilizer on the deep mulch will kill the life in the soil, so will too much of any kind of spray. You get too much neem oil soaking down in there. That's where the diatomaceous earth works really well, because it's not going to hurt any of the life in the soil. You get too much dish soap on the soil, you're going to disrupt the life a little bit in the soil. And we can just do our best, and I know I disrupt the life all the time, but we try to keep as much of it going as possible. In areas where our walking paths and stuff, we never dig. I haven't fertilized or dug in that garden except to put plants in over 5 years. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. Yes?
So, do you just add more mulch every season?
All through the season.
All through the season?
Yep. When,
And that's the only upkeep, really? Okay. And mulch? Okay.
honestly, that's all I do.
Yeah.
The hardest work we do is harvesting. That little patch took us 3 days, well, it took me 3 days to harvest that you can see if you go and look at the channel, and I've got it cut apart. This one, I think we did that one over 6 days, and then my wife went out there after I got done harvesting and brought in another 30 pounds that I missed. Because the roots, the stems go out everywhere the roots touch, or the stems touch, they root, and and they make tubers. They're not as big as the big ones, but you can have a lot of dinners on sweet potatoes that are, you know, little quarter pounders. Those are pretty nice.
So, did you say you just put everything out there in layers, or do you mix it? Because you said that you use a combination of,
Yes.
yes, is
It
that?
goes in as a layer because you put this stuff down and you put this stuff down. Now, when you open it up to plant, I use a pitchfork. Everything I do is with a pitchfork. I take and make a row, so I'm mixing it, right?
Yeah.
As I'm tossing it off to the side. So it does get mixed up.
Okay.
And then when we bring it back, then it kind of is mixed together. I mean, I don't take in, that's why I said my secret recipe is a little bit of this, a little bit of that. However it goes together,
Yeah.
it's all fine.
Okay. I didn't know if you put it down, took your pitchforks, mixed it up a little bit, and let it go. Okay.
Once you start doing it, then that becomes work. I
Yeah.
just go out there and I
Okay.
go get the next one, and then, I mean, you'll take your fork and kind of level it out, and you kind of can mix it up that way. But when you're mowing, you fresh cut lawn grass, if you ever notice, a very small pile will get very hot really fast. So we let it sit, and then we rake it up, and so we let it kind of dry a little bit before we put it on there. Now this is a really cool thing if you have containers, any of your container stuff, let your lawn grass dry a little bit, and then just use that as a mulch, cover it 2 or 3 inches. All right, this is a saying that I picked up, and I find it really true. If you're going to do if you want to make a small change, you change the way you do things. If you want to make a big change, you change the way you see things. And it took us a long time to change the way we saw things. I'm going to put cut grass in my pots. I'm not doing that. Once we did it, we had to water less. The plants went. They were happier. The roots were cooler. It worked for us. So that's a nice little benefit. And it took us a long time. I just had faith, and I went through it, and it's still sometimes like this doesn't seem right. Because I did, you know, I tilled and hoed for many, many years. And this is now, it's a pleasure to go out in the garden. Because I'll go out there and there's no weeds, you don't, we work in the garden maybe an hour a day, and we don't have to pick weeds. So that used to be hours and hours and hours just to try to keep, you know, anything clear enough to find it. Well, I'm sure.
You've answered all mine.
Oh.
I think you've answered all mine.
I'm sure appreciate you coming out and letting me talk with you a little bit. And I've been told I never promote myself well enough. I do have a YouTube channel if you're interested, and it's just Wayland Smalley. Come on, let's plant.
Let's go plant garden.